Hello, Mr. Carval. Thank you for joining our program today. The first question I want to ask you, what do you think about Vietnam banking system at the current time?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to your program, and a very happy new year to you. Um, in terms of the banking system, it has been a difficult year. 2011 has been a difficult year, and the current situation in the banking system is not very robust. In fact, confidence in the banking system, from all accounts, when you talk to people in the public, whether you talk to people in international community, both inside and outside, the confidence in the banking system is weak at the moment.
Yeah. So what do you think is the weakest links in the system, in the banking system of Vietnam?
Um, that's a very good question, and I think to understand what the weakest link is in the banking system, one needs to go back a little bit in time to understand where the weaknesses in the banking system come from. As you know, credit growth in the banking system has been very rapid over the last 4 or 5 years. Credit growth was almost over 30% per year. And that very rapid credit growth was to sectors which are now facing difficulty. It was credit growth that took place in an environment where the economy was not able to handle such a rapid credit growth. The underlying economic activity was not that strong, as a result of which a very large or very substantial part of that credit growth went to sectors which are now facing difficulty, in particular the real estate sector, uh, and also to state-owned enterprises. Both of these sectors are facing difficulties as the economy has slowed down, as the global growth has slowed down. Uh, an important thing to keep in mind is that this lending took place in an environment where there were strong interconnected parties in the banking system and in these sectors. In some ways, it is this interconnectedness between the banks and the parties in the real estate sector and the state owned enterprises that is sort of the weakest link in the banking system, which has led to problems of non performing loans, and also over a period of time has generated a lack of public confidence in the banking system and in the currency, which we can talk about as we go along.
So it means that the weakest link, like in the relationship between banking sector and real estate sector, Vietnam.
It is the weakest link in the sense that it is the hardest link to solve. It is the interconnected net between the bank lending and the sectors to which these banks are lending. As we are seeing right now, there is the real estate prices are falling, profitability in the state-owned enterprise sector is weak, and the low profitability and the falling prices, the real estate sector has an impact on the balance sheet of the commercial banks, which are unable to recover the loans that they have made to these sectors. And that is causing a lot of problems for, in particular, the smaller banks, which are very heavily exposed to the real estate sector, and also perhaps in some of the larger banks, which have lent to the state-owned enterprise sector.
Yeah, right. Thank you very much. And as you know, that currently Vietnam government is carrying out the restructuring process for
Mhm.
banking sector,
Mhm.
and which has been taken place in some other countries.
Mhm.
So can you point out the differences between the processes that is happening in Vietnam and the process in other countries in the world?
Sure. I think it would be fair to say that the restructuring process in Vietnam has only just begun. Um, the authorities, the government, and the State Bank of Vietnam have, I think, just begun to recognize that there are problems in the banking system. Some banks in Ho Chi Minh City, small banks, were merged in December. But in terms of going beyond a merger of the banks and actually restructuring the banks to improve their profitability, to improve the balance sheet of these banks, I think those steps are still to be undertaken. In terms of comparing what is happening in Vietnam to some other countries, it is interesting to look at countries like Thailand and Indonesia, which are in the region, which undertook fairly extensive programs of restructuring in the banking systems. These countries went through a difficult economic environment in the mid to the late 1990s, and a very important part of recovering from that crisis was the restructuring of their banking systems and their financial systems. But Vietnam is in the very, very early stages of beginning that process of restructuring the banking system. All that has been done up till now is to merge a few bad banks together, but improving the balance sheet of these commercial banks is something that remains to be done, and that is going to be a slightly long process, which will take place over a period of time.
Yes, so can you draw out some lessons from some other countries in the regions to Vietnam, to the process that is happening in Vietnam?
I think in terms of going back and learning some lessons from other countries, again, I think Thailand and Indonesia are interesting examples where some of the problems that we see in Vietnam were experienced in those countries as well. The first thing to keep in mind in any form of bank restructuring is that there has to be a considerable determination on the part of the government and of the central bank and of the other authorities to undertake this process of restructuring. There has to be a recognition that there is a problem in the banking system that needs to be resolved. There has to be a clear strategy that would be followed as part of the restructuring. That strategy has to be formulated and explained very clearly to the public. Then an action plan needs to be formed with particular time frames over which all of these actions will need to be undertaken. And finally, there has to be a very clear determination that the bank restructuring will be undertaken. And as part of the restructuring process, a variety of institutions need to be formed to deal with the various elements of the restructuring strategy. At the same time, the central bank itself has to improve its supervision of the banking system. How the bad assets in the banking system have to be dealt with, that has to be determined. Asset management companies or other forms of dealing with the bad assets has to be resolved, and the bad assets of the banks have to be separated from the good performing assets, so the banking system can begin to again start lending to the economy and perform the role that it's supposed to perform in terms of supporting economic activity. So there's a variety of steps that need to be followed in any process of bank restructuring, and I think the experience of Thailand and Indonesia are good examples to look at in this context.